another episode of Deep Thynkers Society, and I have Maddie back with us today. Welcome back, Maddie. We missed you the last few. Our guest here today is H. He has a few podcasts of his own, and I was blessed to be a guest on his Inner World Odyssey, and that was a great conversation. I'll be sure to link that in the show notes today. How are you doing today, H?
Yeah, I'm good. How's everyone doing?
I'm good. I'm good. Yeah.
I'm good.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I'm H. I go by H the comedian when I do comedy, and I've been involved in a lot of industries throughout my life, just trying to learn about myself and the world. I'm an open-minded person. I like to get to know people and learn about how they think and how the world works. And yeah, I'm happy to be here on the podcast, and I enjoyed having you on my podcast. And I think it's a great platform to have conversations and get to know people.
That's good. That's really good to hear. So, the topic we have today is sexuality. And the reason I invited H in is because I learned a little bit about him when I interviewed him and when I watched his H cast comedy podcast, and he identifies as asexual. So I thought, well, how interesting that would be to have him on, because I don't know a lot about asexuality. And, from my perspective, I don't know a lot about the labels of sexuality because I don't believe in labels. I do know some of the basics. I know that there's bisexuality where people will be with more than one gender. I know that there is gay sexuality, which is, where they go with just the same gender. And then, lesbian, or, there's other terms that I actually really don't know the meanings to, because I just feel like labels are extremely limiting. When you put a label on somebody, you literally cut them off from, exploring or being any other way in life. And we should be more fluid, in my opinion. Why don't you share a little bit about how you realized you were asexual, and maybe the definition of asexual?
Yeah, for sure. So I think I realized early on when I was in high school, there was a lot of hype about sex and sexual activity discussion amongst my guy friends. And that's like a common topic when you're growing up. And I didn't find that I shared the same excitement about losing my virginity or engaging in the act of sex. And throughout my growing up, I had some opportunities to experience sexual activity and realized that it's not something that I'm excited about. Like, I have always been attracted to women in a certain way, kind of like liking how they look and feeling emotional and having some stimulation related to that. But in terms of being excited about intercourse or other sexual acts, I've never had that kind of excitement. So from seeing some examples come up later on into my 20s, I grew up in the 90s, so it's only been more recent that there's been representation in the media where I can point to and say, oh, that sounds like what I'm experiencing. And that's where I found out about the label of asexuality.
I do have a question, and I hope this is okay if I bring this up. I do recall you mentioning that you also are autistic. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So are you comfortable talking about that?
Yeah, for sure.
So do you think, and I'm only asking because, again, this is something I'm learning about. Do you think that your asexuality has any connection to your autism?
Yeah, I do think there could be a link just because from connecting with different groups of people on the spectrum and uh, talking to doctors, they said there's been research that could suggest there's a link. And I was part of a study once where they were asking us, people with autism, that is, about our sexual interests. And I said, well, I don't have specifically sexual interests. Would I be a candidate for this study? And they said, yeah. And then I guess they found out that there's a correlation between the number of people who are autistic and also are asexual.
Do you think, knowing what you know about yourself, because, prior to coming on today, when you and I were catching up, you mentioned that you're really working on yourself. So I was wondering, you know, I know that autism is very broad, and
Mhm.
you deal with your emotions differently and you process things differently. I feel like sexuality and your what you're drawn to in people has a lot to do with your mental processing, as well as like in your head, as well as the way it matches your hormones. So I'm curious if you think that maybe that link that they talked about has anything to do with that connection of maybe it's because your focus and the way you process isn't necessarily, and so
Mm.
therefore other things seem more of an interest to you, and therefore could maybe um have, your passion, that the energy of passion that you have when you're sexually attracted to somebody, maybe that energy of that passion gets directed into other things as opposed to, hormones. I feel like sex and sexuality in general, and the act of sex has a lot to do with the way we're conditioned as well. So being that your brain processes differently, I'm sure your conditioning level is also different.
Yeah, that's interesting because I also try to make those type of connections. I like to get to know myself and be open about what I feel and how I process things. Like I'm speaking to a psychiatrist now, or a therapist rather, who's I'm talking about some of these things and trying to find connections and figure out what may be connected. Like at one point, I thought it could be possible that maybe something traumatic was a cause of the asexuality. And from what I understand, it's a healthy, normal sexuality. And I guess it differs from person to person. But to me, I guess I was always looking for a reason because it's not in the norm. It's about 1% of people that experience asexuality. So even those who are aware of differ, different sexualities might not acknowledge or be aware of it as a something that happens with people.
So, when have you met other people that are also asexual?
Yeah, I was part of a asexual dating group for a bit, and I met with people who had similar mindsets.
And what does that look? What did that look like? Like, because in the dating scene of people who are more prone to wanting to engage in a sexual activity, and they are attracted to the other for whatever reason. Maybe they're attracted to somebody because their looks are appealing to them, and that might be what turns them on. Or it could be they are attracted to somebody because they have money. Some people are physically attracted to people that have money. Some people are physically attracted to people because they're super intelligent. And then there's people that are really physically attracted to people because of the way that they deal with their emotions. So there's so many different reasons to be sexually attracted to people. But when you're asexual and that is an interest, what does that dating scene look like?
Yeah, well, it's interesting you say, because what I've found is that people seem to have a core interest in sex behind their enthusiasm to date, it seems. So for me, I found not so much of a interest in dating because there's not so much a distinction between dating and having friends if there's nothing sexual. So I think in terms of dating, I like the closeness I can get with somebody, being emotionally close to somebody. And I do have affinities for certain aesthetics. So I like how certain people look, but that's not at the core of what attracts me to someone. It's more just their vibe or their energy. And if someone has a vibe I find exciting or fun, then it's someone I like to be around. And it's also usually not in a sexual way. So I find that I can get that with any kind of person that I feel an excitement about connecting with them.
That's wonderful. So are you with anybody right now?
No, I'm not. I just making friends and enjoying the connections that I happen across.
That's really awesome. That's really, really awesome.
Oh, I was wondering, like, what's the difference between asexuality and just being absent, like a faith-based kind of, I just sort of believe that, and then, or just feeling like you're whole. Does asexuality just feel like you're whole? You don't need anybody else. You're like the book, the children's book, the uh, Big O, the missing piece, and the Big O. One of my favorite children's books. Like the missing piece is like you're always looking for someone to complete. There's the Big O, which you're already complete. You know, and to me, it's like asexuality. You're already complete. You don't need like another person to complete you. You're whole unto yourself. But he has that belief. He's that belief, behavior of sexuality.
Yeah, so to answer the first question, like people who are abstinent or for religious reasons not participating in activities, if they still have the urge to, then that's different than somebody who never had the urge and is also not participating. So it's not like I'm
Choosing.
forcing my, yeah, I'm not, it's not difficult for me to not participate in sexual activities. I just don't have the urge to. It's not something that comes into my mind.
When I think of think about how our body works. I'm sorry, Matt. Did you want to?
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm the same way. I mean, I've been celibate for 12 years. I have the urge, but I don't. It's like I'm like a post sex now, like post sexual activity. So there's an aspect to asexuality, but you're post you're done. It's like you're like I'd rather just create, you know, focus on this more than anything else. If it comes along, it comes along. Or is it different?
Maybe.
If it does come along, still asexual.
Yeah, I think that could be in the realm of asexuality. Like Laurie said, there's a spectrum in autism as well as in asexuality. Like they have many labels to split up types of asexuals, but since labels aren't that useful, it's just to say that everyone has their own particular ways of being. So some might even still enjoy participating in sex, but on a lesser level than someone who would not be considered asexual, or someone may have zero interest in anything and still be within the same categorization as someone who enjoys being close with someone physically and emotionally.
Yeah, I was one. It's funny because that's what I was going to say before Matt chimed in. I was going to say that when you look at the science behind sexuality, and that's why I asked if autism was maybe a reason why you identified with the sexuality, is when you look at the science behind our bodies and our hormones, there are reasons that hormonally we might be attracted to men. We might have too much of, like for women, example, who are attracted to men, they have the female hormones like fluid and active in their body. And then there's men who are attracted to men, and maybe they have more female hormones going through their body. And then there's gut health, and gut health could potentially, or even addictions, gut health, which stems from, sometimes an addiction to sugar, or an addiction to alcohol, or an addiction to a drug, or, pain medications, that creates a gut health, and that affects your hormones. And then inactivity, not moving enough, then you're not creating, motivation in your body, and then that leads to a form of depression, and there could be deficiencies. So I always wonder, is sexuality based on your hormones? Or at other times, is sexuality based on, childhood trauma or the way you were raised? Or is it a combination of all of those things? Because, I find it interesting when you have women who are physically attracted to other women who look like men. And then you have men who are physically attracted to other men that look like women. Is that a conditioning from early childhood? Is that a hormonal imbalance? Or is that the fact that who they're attracted to has nothing to do with sexuality, and more to do with what I identify as is like a connection, or a need being fulfilled, that somebody loved, that they could be loved by them. They realize, oh, I like this person, and I could see myself, wanting to know more about them, and maybe even eventually loving them, or at least having some sort of connection where you choose to have sex. And so for me, I don't identify under any labels, because I'm usually sexually attracted to anybody who I feel heart-centered with, like if I feel an unspoken connection. But then, hormones do play in it, and there are times where you see like a really, hot male or female on the TV, or, and so I think it plays into it a little bit for me, but I don't think I could go with the label, because as soon as I say I'm this, or as soon as I say I'm that, then I'm going to be attracted to somebody who isn't any of those things. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's well said. And I think it's great that you don't put yourself in a box using labels, because a lot of times people will use that to stereotype you or something. And especially when there are so many media stereotypes for each type of label, it could be damaging or make you less aware of who you are. And I think, to what you said about if something is based on trauma or if it's natural, it's interesting to me, because I've had that thought. But then in the same sense, we don't look for that in people who are heterosexual. So that's kind of saying that we're looking for a problem when there might not be a problem.
Right.
Because
Well, that's a good point. That's a really good point.
yeah, like if someone is attracted to the opposite sex and interested in the right amount of sex, so that's normative. We don't go and say, oh, maybe some trauma caused them to be that way. It's only in divergent sexualities that we would consider it an issue. And even like, in the past, it was considered a disorder to be homosexual or to have divergent sexualities, and recently has been relabeled to,
Being homo.
yeah. So maybe these are just antiquated ways of thinking that there has to be something wrong if you're not heteronormative.
Yeah, because really what created the term normal, and like Matt had just said, is religion. Religion kind of basically labeled normal being the masculine and the feminine, and that's how you co-create and bring life into the world. But when you look way back into history, at the Roman, there was a lot of sexuality, gay sexuality, interactivity, as well as sexual activity with children. That was not uncommon or normal, and then also with family members, like keeping the royal blood, and having sex with, members of your family. And if they happen to be young, and that they're at child rearing age, then, they will have sex with them too. And so, through time, I feel like sexuality has changed so much that I do agree that there needs to be a level of masculine and feminine, but I don't believe that that level of masculine and feminine energy has to come from a male and a female. I believe that, there are females that carry a lot of masculine energy, and there's males that carry a lot of feminine energy. And not only that, I see myself as carrying a healthy balance of masculine and feminine energy. Like, I am not scared to, do hard work like a man, or be protective like a man. And I definitely feel comfortable being very nurturing like a woman, and cry like a woman. I'm definitely a girl. I mean, I cry. I just feel like there could be a balance in a human. And why can't we, instead of looking at it like you need a masculine partner and a feminine partner, why can't we be masculine and feminine balanced in our own self, and then be attracted to somebody who is masculine and feminine and balanced in their own self? And, having partnership that maybe there's sexuality involved, maybe there's sex involved, maybe there isn't. Maybe, the interest is a passion, but you enjoy each other's company so much that you want to live your life together. And that's kind of where I was wondering with you, H, is that, as being asexual, and you could do with or without sex, it doesn't really matter to you. What does it look like? What does a partner look like for you? And do you have the desire to have a life partner as opposed to being alone, or do you have the desire to just have bonds with other humans, and maybe multiple humans?
Yeah, like I find I do like to foster relationships and grow with someone. So in that way, I think it would be valuable to have a partner, because you can grow together throughout your life, rather than if someone is an acquaintance or a friend, you might not be as close or be in touch as often. So in that way, I think it would be good to have someone to grow with. And I've had those types of relationships in the past that have felt fulfilling.
For you, being asexual, what if, and this could have happened, but I'm just curious how you would deal with the scenario. But what if a human, male or female, was physically attracted to you? They enjoyed you. They really liked you in a sexual way, and in a everyday bonding kind of way. And they, and you enjoyed them too. And so therefore you created a natural bond, and they wanted to, be sexual with you. Is that something that you're choosing not to have in your life at all? Or is that something you'd be willing to assist them with, because that's something that they need to have to be fulfilled?
Yeah, like I've had some relationships in the past where we've had sexual relations, and I felt it was something that brought us closer emotionally in some cases. And in the cases where I felt that it was just a sexual desire for them, I felt not so keen on it. And just for me, I think it's a bit awkward if I don't have the attraction. So I don't want to be in a position where I'm patronizing the other person if they're excited about something and I'm not. So in that sense, I think it wouldn't work out if they had those kinds of urges, and so it could be difficult. But if things are mutual, then like I'm always open to see what I'm comfortable with if I have a healthy relationship with them.
I really like that you're open to the fact that maybe you'll meet somebody and maybe things would change. So that's really, I mean, in that way, you have that fluid energy as well. So I I don't know if this is anything you could chime in on, H, but so when I look at sexuality or people that are physically, like, I watch women who like are like very sexual toward whomever, or men who are like they get very easily aroused sexually, and then then there's some that they'll watch porn to help them engage when they, for whatever reason, because of sex. So really, so the call to sex. So men who want to send women their dick pics because they think that women want to see how big or what their dick looks like, and then the women who will show their breasts to men because they think that that's what all men want, like that. And then the people who don't have sex in a relationship for long periods of time, and then by choice or by whatever, I or those people that have want to have sex all the time, like the people that want to have sex all the time and the people that are sexually attracted to other people easily seem to be what society labels as normal. You hear it in music and rap songs, and you hear it in sexual healing, and Marvin Gaye, and then you hear it, and you see it in movies and the way that they insinuate that, well, what do you mean you're not attracted to him? Is there something wrong with you? Or, or why haven't you guys had sex in a year? And so when I look at the fact that that people think it's normal to be over sexual and to want sex to have all the time, and it's not normal to not want to have sex all the time or not have the drive for sex all the time, I find that kind of ass backwards, for a lack of a better word, because there are multiple reasons why people don't want to have sex all the time. And I think there's more people out there than not who are listening to this, and they'll just be like, I feel bad when I tell my partner, no, I don't want to have sex, because they want it, and they want it a lot more often than I want it. I don't need it. Like, that's not what I need in our relationship. Kind of to the point, H, where you already are. They have a bond, they have a life, they have a story together. And then there's women who will partner, and there's men who will partner with women. They'll get with a partner. And sex is not a priority. They love that they could, raise a family together, and they love their life together. So I feel like in general, sex is overdone with media. Like, it's overdone, I mean, there are men, I will say, like, naturally, once their hormones kick in, it is natural for them to, with healthy hormones, and to want to have sex more often than not. They wake up in the morning ready to go, like their body is like, ready to go. But women, their bodies aren't like that. Women need something to bring them around to it. And it could be the pheromones from the male, or whatever, or the fact that he brought her breakfast in bed, So I think that, the topic of sexuality in general, sex in general, needs to be redefined or more fluid and open, kind of like when we label, you know, who you're attracted to. And there are people in this world who absolutely don't want it that way. They're like, it needs to be men and women, and anything else is just not okay. And, you know, and they get stuck in the, I'm the man and I work and the woman takes care of the kids. And if she isn't taking care of the kids and she's staying home, then she needs to go, you know, contribute somehow in the world. And so, I mean, that black and white, I mean, we're not in the 50s anymore, you know, like,
Mhm. And
and
it takes so long to change, I find. Like, as someone, I'm 36 now, and I was growing up in the 90s and early 2000s, I felt this kind of hyper masculine, hyper sexual energy where it's like the norm was to be aggressive and in a sexual way. And I very much didn't relate to that. I was very quiet and passive and more like the girls that were more of the aggressors. And people just told me, oh, you're never going to meet any girls that way because you have to be the one to be aggressive. And I just said, well, that's not who I am. I'll wait for them to be the ones to come to me. And then, like, many years later, things changed a bit. And now there are women who are comfortable being the ones to initiate and stuff. And I think that it allows a place for men who are more passive and like those types of women, and by society accepting different roles that aren't just the male hunter and female passive, we get to see more diversity, and like there's different types of relationships. I see now there's a lot more openness, and there's a lot more people identifying as polygamous or non-binary and having different types of relationships that aren't just strictly male female heterosexual relationships. And for myself, I see that as a possibility of some kind of alternative type of relationship that's not traditional, where I could fit in with someone as a friend or as a group of friends that are close. And with what you said about the media portraying these like hyper masculine and sexual roles, I think that like Hollywood and these groups of people that put out so much content from a limited amount of perspectives, it has to do with that. I think a lot of male directors in that space happen to be hypersexual and are projecting their own desires onto the world, which
yeah,
is why for many years we've seen so much of these narratives play out on the big screen with primarily white male and female love interests and not so much representation in homosexual and biracial relations. And slowly we're seeing more of that, and people can relate to these new narratives and new stories that they see themselves represented in.
yeah, you're so right. It is slowly changing. My daughter is in junior high, and the kids are so much more accepting. Not all of them, because there's some that are still very religious, but for the most part, it's not unusual like when Matt and I were in the 70s. We knew my uncle Danny. He always had a friend. He always had a male friend. And I had no idea growing up, none, not until I was a young adult, that he was gay. Like it never entered my mind. He just always had a best friend. He always had someone he lived with, he created a life with, you know. And I had no clue that it was even a thing. And then even myself, I didn't know that I had feelings for other genders. I had no idea. Somebody even had mentioned it to me. We were in a car. I was with a coworker, and then I was with a really close friend. And my close friend was like, "Oh, who knows, Lori? Maybe you're gay." And I'm like, "No, no." And I got so defensive. And then my coworker, who kind of knew me, got defensive for me too. And she's like, "No way." And then I had met somebody that was a female that I was like seriously physically attracted to, but like a little bit more than that. And I realized, oh, I guess maybe I am. And then I realized I don't like labels because I was still attracted to men. But I wasn't attracted to just any men. I had a partnership who I adopted my daughter with. And she was more masculine, but she was dressed feminine. She looked like a woman, but she had a lot of masculine energy. And she, like you were saying, she was the dominant one in the sense that she wasn't scared to ask, because she wasn't scared to be the aggressor in the relationship. And I was drawn to that because I was usually the one that was the aggressor in relationships. And so I think that was what was initially appealing to me. And then sexually though, she had male energy. Like she was like a man. And I felt like I was having sex with a man in the sense that men come across, and not all men, because this is stereotyping, but in my experience, men who are hypersexual who come across, like you were also saying, aggressive and dominant. And in my vibe, that was selfish because I wasn't feeling included in the union at that point. And I had never felt that way prior to us engaging in sexual activity. We had a great partnership and we got along well and everything was balanced. But when it came down to sexuality, she made me feel absent in the scenario. And so I was like, well, then that made me realize that I can't have a label because she was quite easily played the male role, and she's a female and I'm attracted to her. So that's really when I started to realize that gender had nothing to do with what I was attracted to. It was like a mutual attraction. It was something that drew me to them.
Energy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting you say like a female or a male energy, because we still have those labels in terms of gender and to genderify certain behaviors, which may be lost in the future as well as we discover the diversity. Like, I think a lot of people have trouble understanding non-binary as a gender because they see things as either one or the other. And by my understanding, I try to explain it from my perspective, which is like I have experienced growing plants and growing weed plants. And as anyone who's grown weed plants knows, sometimes you get a female plant that has seeds in it. And that's both gender plant. So in nature, we see these differences. There's not just a male and a female. There are weed plants that have seeds, so that the seeds are the genitalia. And so that's like a hermaphrodite gendered plant in nature. And so I see how there could be people who are both genders or neither gender in the same way. It just seems like whenever there's something that is binary, we always end up finding that there's something else in between.
That's why there's really no room for labels. Really, I mean, we should just be fluid and go with what we feel called to and live from that perspective. And if we get to a point in a relationship where we don't feel sexually bonded with our partner, we need to maybe look at why. Is it because that's not needed in the relationship anymore? Is it because they treat us a certain kind of way and we're not attracted to them in that way that we were at one time, and so we tune that sexual part out? Is it because the relationship doesn't need it? It runs well without it. So I think that being fluid like that, maybe one partner is still hypersexual and the other one just isn't anymore. And then maybe one likes to start behaving it differently. Like maybe the man wants to start wearing women's clothes, and the woman, wants to be the one that wears the pants in the house, and now she wants to be the one that goes to work, and he'll stay home and dress like a woman and take care of the baby. Like that's fluid because they didn't start the relationship that way, but they enjoyed each other's energy so much that they allowed each other to grow the way they needed to grow, and they were okay staying in the relationship. But once things change in a relationship for whatever reason, and it's not similar, and I don't mean like 3-4 years down the road, I'm talking like you've been together like 10 plus years, you really need to look at, like reflect on your relationship and see if this is the person you still need to be with, because maybe you both have grown in different ways, or you two need to be comfortable adapting to each other's new ways and in order to stay together because you love each other. You know what I mean? Like, I think that needs to be the new normal.
Yeah, I just see it as interesting when people are able to discover new things about themselves and be open to things. Because if you're always one way and you label yourself and say, I'm just a straight male and that's all I'll ever be, you're limiting your range of experiences. Whether that's the only thing you ever enjoy or not, there's always room for firsts. So I think it's more interesting in life when we have more firsts. So like you said, some people might experiment and start dressing like a woman or take on different roles. That would be an interesting experience if they haven't done that before. And so that's why I like to figure out what I'm into and just see what's out there and experiment, because there are so many different roles we can try to take on in the world that we might enjoy.
That we never allowed ourselves to be comfortable with because there's a stigma out there, There's a label out there, and maybe that label people, frown upon it. So we don't even think like you said, I'm heterosexual and I'll always be that way and I'll never change because that's just who I am. Well, how do you know? And is that who you're always going to be because you're fearful of maybe liking something different? Or is it who you're always going to be because you really feel that that's who you are? Or are you fluid enough to know that if one day you happen to walk into a coffee shop as a man, and you walk into a coffee shop and another man asks to sit at the table with you, and while you're sitting there, you have such engaging conversation that maybe you have like feelings you never really realized were there before. Are you comfortable enough and fluid enough to allow a possibility of a spark being with a stranger of the same gender?
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's always interesting to see where things can go and find different avenues about yourself, because we're all pretty like complicated beings.
Yeah.
We're not all just one thing. So as we get to know ourselves, we can really explore the different dynamics that we can relate to in the world. And that's why I think I see in others sometimes when someone is repressed and they're denying things about themselves, where they might believe they're only one way because they're afraid that they won't be accepted. And I feel bad if someone could have had a very fun or interesting, fulfilling experience that they denied themselves because they shamed themselves or felt shamed by others. And I think we should create an environment that's accepting so we can have those fulfilling experiences and find out more about ourselves.
and where we're safe enough to change if we want to change.
Well, I had a couple things that was going through my head. I think one of the main things I wanted to address is like asexuality. Is it like a new thing, or is it always been there? And is there a connection between like more asexuality people getting closer to AI? Is there a connection between AI and non-binary and asexuality?
Hmm.
Could it be something connected?
Yeah, I think there have always been some cases of asexuality. Like I said, I've researched that there's only about 1% of people that identify, and it could be something related to what's happening in the world. Like I feel like with populations growing, it could be some kind of a natural thing where if there's too many people procreating, maybe some people start to be
way
so like in terms of myself, I feel like I could be helping the world by not having more kids if there's too many kids out there. And if everyone is hypersexual and having a lot of kids, there might be too many people. And this could be like a way that naturally more people end up non-procreative for the sake of the population.
Interesting. I never looked at it from that perspective before. I think the merrier, though. No, just kidding. When you look at it from a spiritual perspective,
Yeah.
you know, when you look at it from a spiritual perspective, I don't think we really have control over other people's karma. And so I believe that a lot of us are on that karmic loop in this lifetime. And this is way off topic, but, you know, sometimes we have all those children because we need to like wrap up the karma with those souls from past lives and whatnot. So, and again, they're not really past lives, and that's a whole nother topic, another show too. But I think that, you know, everything is happening exactly as it's supposed to happen. And if you choose not to have sex because you don't feel like we need more children in the world, you know, more power to you. But then you have those people whose bodies just want it, you know, and then they don't have anybody to have it with. And then you have to start looking at something totally different. It has nothing to do with sex at that point. It has to do with something inside of you that you need to address, that needs to be looked at. And from I think I need to look at, well, I have been, you know, doing a lot of healing work on myself for the last like 5 to 6 years. And what I've really learned about myself is that I just don't trust easily in general. And I don't share my space, my personal space easily in general. And in order to share that space, it usually a karmic connection, like somebody I feel for some reason, I just have always known them. And when I don't have that unspoken knowingness that I know them from somewhere, I don't feel called to anything else. So for me, I feel like it's really unique. And I feel like I've definitely healed past the secure part. I don't feel uncomfortable with boundaries anymore. I don't feel uncomfortable not saying yes or no anymore. And I feel like I could easily have a secure attachment, whereas before I definitely didn't have secure attachments. So I think I'm at a stage in my life that once that, you know, feeling is there with another human and it's mutual, because it definitely needs to be mutual and they're emotionally available, then, you know, then I get to integrate that secure attachment style that I've been, you know, healing within myself and allow that in. But, you know, we're not always in charge. You know, we everything happens for a reason, and we kind of got to flow with it and let the universe kind of show us what we need to know, and then we need to feel comfortable enough with ourselves to go within and do the inner work. You know what I mean? It sounds like you're doing a lot of your own inner work, and you've discovered a lot about yourself. And I think that's really awesome.
Yeah, thanks. I've been trying to, and I'm glad to hear that you're in the path to being more comfortable and finding out about yourself as well.
Yeah, it took a lot. People don't like to look in the mirror. It's not easy to look at your shit. Nobody wants to look in the toilet at the shit they just had. We don't want to look at that. That's gross. And that's how we feel about ourselves a lot. We feel gross for some reason, and we don't really understand why, and we don't want to look at it. And so we just go along living life with that shame or guilt, and our surroundings reflect that back to us. We end up having toxic relationships, unhealthy relationships, because we don't want to deal with our own shit. And so once we feel comfortable going within and really looking at the problem, because the problem is never anybody else, as much as we want to blame it on others. The problem is never anybody else. It's always something we need to heal,
Yeah, that's what I found. It's always helpful to try to find within ourselves what is missing or how we can move past something and grow. And that's what I'm trying to do, and look at the world from new perspectives, and as much as I can be open to new things, and just try to connect with people in ways that is safe and feels good.
So as we wrap up the show, I just wanted to ask both of you, if you both looking at life from, your perspective of sexuality, if there's anybody out there in the world who's listening to the show who, you wanted to give advice on in regards to maybe they're confused about their sexuality, maybe they don't understand their sexuality, what advice would you give somebody listening today to feel comfortable and safe?
Yeah, I would say just to spend time to get to know yourself and to love yourself, and to not judge yourself for whatever you're feeling inside. And then you can see who you might relate to, and just find someone that you can connect with, and you don't have to define yourself or the relationship in any kind of way. It's just nice to be open to different types of connections.
Absolutely. That's very well said. What about yourself, Matt?
I agree. Yeah, just to be comfortable, and just follow your heart. If it doesn't feel right, walk away from it or take a step back. Because flow with it. Always flow. What feels good. It feels right.
Yeah, it's absolutely about listening to yourself, listening inwardly. Yeah, if it feels a certain kind of way, don't shame yourself away from it. It felt good. Like, why is it bad to feel good?
Right.
Yeah, I think that people need to learn to trust their vibes and their inner self, and then start surrounding themselves with people who allow them the safe place to just be who they are, and it's not always easy to make space for people that who don't feel highly of themselves, people who have self-esteem issues, and certain characteristics that are not easily lovable. But I feel like everybody needs that safe space to just be themselves. And then if they feel welcomed, sometimes they start to change. We all need community. We all need connection. And I think that maybe we should start practicing as humans to make safe space for people, even if we don't agree with their ways or their thoughts or their behaviors, and maybe create boundaries, but allow them to know that they're safe being who they are. But boundaries are definitely important.
I was just going to say, in terms of being asexual, I found it's nice that with the LGBT community, they extended the words to include asexuals, where they have it LGBTIA. And so I feel I like that community they have, and it's like a safe, fun community where they're accepting, and to be invited to that as part of their acronym feels good, because it's like a nice environment to feel like there's a place to be yourself and to be loving towards others.
I agree 100%. That I didn't know that they had done that. And I think that that's super awesome that there's a community out there that people can feel comfortable being themselves in. But before people are comfortable being themselves around other communities, sometimes they need to learn to be comfortable with themselves first.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Well, thank you both. It was so nice having you back today, Maddie and H. I really enjoyed your company and your perspective, and you enlightened me in quite a few different ways and made me think. So I really love that stimulating conversation, and I appreciate you being on today. Is there do you want to share with the audience, how people can find your podcast or find you and maybe listen to some of your content?
Yeah, for sure. My podcast is Inner World Odysseys, where I speak to people about their inner experiences and perspectives. And yeah, my Instagram is H the Comedian, and I post some things on there too.
Cool.
Wonderful. I'll make sure that I add it to the show
Check
notes.
that out in a minute. H, what's it again? H,
The Comedian.
H the Comedian. Dot com.
No, that's the Instagram.
Instagram. Cool. Check it out.
Thank you both. I appreciate you. Thank you both for being on.
Thank you, Laurie.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, H.